Hello everyone. This video is a companion tutorial for the I-1 rating on Pilot Edge. The I-1 material on the Pilot Edge Training Center website gives you enough information to successfully pass the rating. But this tutorial uses the I-1 as a foundation to explain in more depth about your interactions with ATC during an instrument flight, touches on some basic IFR planning, and spends quite a bit of time on how to decipher instrument departure and instrument approach clearances. I think you'll find the section on clearances good background for all the ratings on Pilot Edge and for every future instrument flight you make. In many ways, the I-1 rating is just a stretched out traffic pattern. We're going to take off from runway 19 right, or actually runway 19 left, it really doesn't matter. Then make a right turn, which is like a crosswind leg, and then eventually another right turn, which will be our downwind leg, and then another right turn onto what amounts to a base leg, and then yet one more right turn to intercept the runway 19 right localizer, which is like our turn to final, and then we'll be landing straight ahead on runway 19 right. And so you should certainly recognize this as a basic right-hand traffic pattern. If that's not completely clear to you, then you should probably go back and review the V1 rating and some basic material on flying traffic patterns at airports. This is actually even easier than flying a traffic pattern as far as I'm concerned, because it's a big stretched out pattern where the controller is going to call every single one of our turns for us and tell us exactly what altitude they want us to be at all times. So we actually have very few decisions we have to make on our own until we're established on the final approach course. So even though the flight itself is going to end up being simple, the planning is going to be just a little more complicated than it might seem at first glance. Remember that this is a flight under instrument flight rules. One of the things that implies is that we actually need to have a route that we're going to fly, even though we're leaving and coming back to the same airport. We're not actually going to end up flying that route, but we have to have one. And it's fair to ask, okay, why? Well, the basic answer to that is that so that we know and so that air traffic control knows exactly what's going to happen if we lose communication somewhere along the way. There's a large body of information an instrument-rated pilot needs to learn about lost communications procedures, and that's all really far beyond the scope of this rating in this tutorial. But it is the basic reason that we need to have an actual route of flight that takes us from John Wayne Airport to somewhere and then back to John Wayne Airport via the ILS approach or some instrument approach. So where is an appropriate somewhere for this flight? The most general answer to that question is somewhere that we can navigate to with the equipment that's on our airplane that will allow us to start an instrument approach to John Wayne Airport. Looking a little more closely at the ILS approach plate, there are three places that might meet this requirement. The Pomona VOR, which is up here to the north. This also is an initial approach fix for the ILS approach, and we know that because of this designation here of IAF, initial approach fix. Another possibility is Sager intersection, which is also an initial approach fix for the approach. And then the third possibility is the Seal Beach VOR over here, which is the beginning of a feeder route for the approach. Don't worry right now about what a feeder route is, although you will eventually want to know, and you can learn that by reading or by watching the Pilot Edge workshops on instrument flying that are available on YouTube or by links from the Pilot Edge workshop. So of these three possibilities, the closest one is the Seal Beach VOR, and it also best matches the general shape of the route that we expect to fly. So we'll file that as part of our route from John Wayne Airport and back. Now, we normally don't do route planning on an approach plate because approach plates cover such a small area normally that it's useless. You can't use them, and they don't have all of the necessary fixes and airways and things like that that you need when you're doing normal flight planning. But in this particular case, it's actually easier to show the route that we're going to file and then the route that we'll actually expect to fly by staying right here on the runway 19 right ILS approach plate. The flight plan that we'll file will be very simple. Our origin and destination will be the same, KSNA, which is John Wayne Airport, and our route is simple, the Seal Beach VOR. You'll see this a little more clearly in a moment when we review actual filing the flight plan. So if we lost communications after takeoff, we would indeed have to fly all the way from John Wayne Airport out to the Seal Beach VOR and then execute the full ILS approach back into John Wayne. But that's a different tutorial and a different rating, so what we're actually going to fly is something much more like the traffic pattern that we saw just a little bit earlier. Before we talk about what's going to happen while we're flying, though, let's talk about filing our flight plan and then getting our IFR clearance. There are a variety of mechanisms you can use to file a PilotEdge flight plan. I'm going to use the form on the PilotEdge website for the tutorial, but you can know that the same exact information is used no matter what mechanism that you use to file your flight plan. So to file a web-based flight plan, we come to the main PilotEdge home page and then come over here to Pilot Resources and select File a Flight Plan. And now there just are several blocks of information that we need to indicate where we're going to go. First of all, we need to tell them whether this is a VFR or an IFR flight plan. And in this case, for the I-1 rating, it is an instrument flight plan, an IFR. We need to tell them the tail number or identification of our aircraft. In this particular case, we're flying a Cessna 172, that the tail number will be 757 Victor Bravo. It is a Cessna 172 that we'll be in. And now we also have to tell it what navigation equipment is aboard the airplane. This is important for air traffic control to know so that they won't ask us to navigate to a fix that we can't find, for example. So Slant Gulf, which is getting to be pretty common these days, indicates that we have a GPS receiver aboard and a transponder and a encoding altimeter, which is capable of through the transponder squawking what's called mode C or mode Charlie. Mode Charlie just means that the transponder can encode the altitude we're flying so that shows up on the air traffic controller's radar scope. In our particular case, we're actually going to be flying an aircraft that is Slant Alpha, another very common equipment indicator. Slant Alpha means that we do have distance measuring equipment on the aircraft and a transponder capable of mode C, but we do not have GPS. In this particular case, we only have VOR receivers aboard the aircraft. So we're going to be Cessna 172 Slant Alpha. The true airspeed is true airspeed is a little bit of a complicated calculation in some cases. It's related to the a temperature as well as the altitude that you're flying at. So we'll just show what our indicated altitude or airspeed is going to be, which will be about 110 knots. We're going to be departing from KSNA, John Wayne. We're going to be arriving back at KSNA. Now a great question that arises is, what altitude are we going to fly at? So under normal circumstances, just as there are VFR cruising altitudes, there are also IFR cruising altitudes depending upon whether you're going to the east or to the west. And they're basically the same rules, except instead of an even or odd 1,000 plus 500 feet, there's just strictly an even or an odd 1,000. Since we're primarily going to be starting off going to the west, we should be filing an even 1,000 feet of altitude. But there are other factors that come into play for instrument cruising altitudes. Our route of flight will determine what we should do. Sometimes things called tech routes come into play and tell us specifically what altitudes we should file. But fundamentally, in some ways, you can almost say it doesn't make any difference, because whatever altitude we request, they're going to give us the altitude that they want us to fly at. For this particular route, we will guess that the altitude is going to be 4,000 feet. If they want us to fly something different, they will tell us that when we collect our clearance. An alternate airport is an airport that we would have to indicate if the airport we were flying to was below or potentially could be below minimums by the time that we arrived there. In this particular case, we don't need an alternate. And as we discussed earlier, we have to indicate our route of flight. And in this case, it is simply going to be that we want our route of flight to be to the Seal Beach VOR. And then finally, the remarks column is anything really that you want to say that is relevant to this particular flight. Remarks are not always visible to all air traffic controllers, but generally they will be visible to the clearance delivery folks. And in this case, we will indicate we want to fly the I-01 rating. We will also request that when we make our call to clearance delivery to get our rating, but it's a good idea to put it in here also. And so that's all there is to it. We've told them what kind of a flight plan we want. We've identified our aircraft, the call sign that we'll be using for our aircraft. We've told them what kind of aircraft that we're in and what kind of navigation equipment we have aboard. We've told them what airspeed we'll be traveling. We've told them where we're departing from, where we're arriving, what altitude we would like to fly at. They're going to tell us whatever the heck they want. We don't need an alternate airport in this particular case. Our route of flight from John Wayne back to John Wayne will be via the Seal Beach VOR, and we're requesting that this will be for an I-1 rating. And then we would just click File Flight Plan. The note up here lets us know that we can file this before we connect to the network, and it will be kept on file for 2 hours. From the time that we file it. So we can file well in advance of when we're actually ready to make our flight, and then we can go ahead and let them know and we'll do this actually in a little while, we'll let them know that there is a request for a flight already on file, and they can look it up by our call sign, and then they can give us our clearance. Okay, so let's assume we've filed our flight plan, finished our pre-flight of the aircraft, and are sitting in the cockpit pretty much ready to go. How do we actually get our IFR clearance? At larger airports like John Wayne, we get our clearance from an ATC function that's very imaginatively called clearance delivery. You can tell if there is a clearance delivery function because there will be a frequency published for it in lots of different places for the airport. On airnav.com, for example, in the airport communications section down in here, we can see that there is a clearance delivery frequency listed. In fact, there are a couple of them. The one that we care about for Pilotage is 118.0. If there is not a clearance delivery frequency listed for an airport, then you can generally get your clearances from ground control. And if this is a non-towered airport, there is still a way to get your clearance, but we'll cover that in a different tutorial in the future. Another place that you can find it is on any of the instrument plates for that airport. So for example, on our ILS runway 19er right approach that we're going to use for the rating, we can find the clearance delivery is right here. Again, it shows 118.0, and it's a fair question as to why clearance delivery is on an approach plate, and I do not know the answer to that, why it's on there. It would make a lot of sense for a departure plate, but for an approach plate, I'm not quite sure why it's there. It may just be because they are keen on listing all of the important frequencies for an airport, and if clearance delivery function happens to be present, that perhaps they just list it on the plate for our convenience so that when we pull up any plate, we have all the frequencies for that airport right at our fingertips. The dialogue with clearance delivery is pretty simple. You tune to the clearance delivery frequency, and as always, you listen for a bit to make sure that nobody is talking before you say anything. This is particularly important when you're tuning to a clearance delivery frequency, because there's almost nothing more annoying than having somebody step on a clearance that you're listening to or that you're reading back to the controller, particularly when it's a long and complicated clearance that you are either trying to write madly down or to read back to the controller, because you're just going to have to start over, or they're just going to have to start over. So take a moment, listen, make sure that the frequency is clear. On Pilot Edge, I generally announce my presence before I launch into my request just because I know the controllers are often working multiple positions, and giving a clearance to a pilot sitting safely on the ground is about the lowest priority of any requests a controller might be working on. So I begin simply with John Wayne Clearance Delivery, Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, and wait for them to respond. And they'll respond simply with something like Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, John Wayne Clearance. And then we say, John Wayne Clearance, Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, IFR to John Wayne, request on file. And that last bit, request on file, tells them that they can pull up the request that we've already filed by checking the computer. Now it's possible that the ATC flight plan coordination system hasn't finished processing our request to assign us a routing and an altitude. And if so, the controller may say something like Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, on request, standby, in which case we can't really do anything but wait. But if the system has already processed our request, they'll start to read it to us almost immediately, and this is the point now where new instrument pilots go into a little bit of a panic, because it sometimes seems like the clearance delivery folks have a running contest going to see which of them can read the longest, most complicated clearance in a single breath with no pauses, and then of course expect us to read the clearance backward perfect almost instantly. So it does take a little practice of listening to instrument clearances because they do come fast. But fortunately, they're read to us in a very organized, structured fashion, which you might not be able to tease out that structure if you're just listening to them without any preparation. And that's really what this part of the tutorial is about. Because indeed they are structured in a very specific way, and that same structure is used for every single clearance that you're going to receive. And one way to remember that clearance is with the acronym CRAFT, C-R-A-F-T. The 5 CRAFT elements will be present in every instrument clearance you receive, and like so many things in instrument flying, knowing what to expect is one of the main secrets of keeping your workload to a manageable level. If this acronym is new to you, why don't you pause the video just for a moment while we're on this slide, and take a moment to read through the 5 parts of a clearance so that you've kind of got them in your mind. And then resume again, and we'll listen to a couple of actual clearances and practice separating out each of the CRAFT elements. Okay, here's our first clearance. This one is from John Wayne to McClelland Palomar Airport down near San Diego. The recording starts with the request from Caravan November 786 Delta Echo, followed immediately by the clearance. Let's listen.
John Wayne Clearance, good afternoon. Caravan November 786 Delta Echo, IFR McClellan.
Caravan 6 Delta Echo, John Wayne Clearance. Good afternoon. Cleared to the Palomar Airport after departure. Fly heading 175. Radar vectors Victor 23 as filed. Maintain 2000. Expect 5000 5 minutes after departure. Departure frequency 127.2. Squawk 7221.
If you got all of that on your first listen, then you probably don't need to watch the rest of this tutorial. That wasn't the fastest clearance I've ever heard read, but it moved along pretty quickly. I'm going to play bits of the clearance again now, breaking it up into the 5 CRAFT elements. First, let's listen to the clearance limit.
Cleared to the Palomar Airport.
The furthest this airplane is cleared to fly is to the Palomar Airport. So that is the limit of their clearance. Now in this case, this is a very typical case, they are cleared all the way from the departure airport to their final destination. That's very common for that to be true. Now let's listen to the route.
After departure, fly heading 175. Radar vectors Victor 23 as filed.
It's very common to receive an initial heading that you need to fly right after takeoff. In this case, 175 degrees, which will be a slight left turn from the John Wayne runway heading of 195 degrees. That heading is a radar vector to an airway that heads down towards Oceanside VOR. That airway is named Victor 23. And then finally, the route portion of the clearance ends with the phrase "as filed." This will sometimes be stated "then as filed." It just depends on how terse the controller is being. As filed means from that point forward, fly the route that you filed in your flight plan. One thing in particular about the route portion of the clearance deserves an extra bit of attention. The ATC phrase, "after departure, fly heading 175," is an actual instruction that you are expected to follow until further ATC instructions about your heading are given. The phrase radar vectors Victor 23 is just an explanation of why you're being given that heading, but it is not, and I repeat, not an instruction to deviate from the 175 heading to actually intercept Victor 23. A pilot flying this route should certainly expect to be told to intercept Victor 23 before they reach the airway. And if I was the pilot and hadn't heard that instruction by the time I was getting close to Victor 23, I would certainly nudge ATC to find out if they really wanted me to stay on that heading, but I would not make the turn on my own. The situation changes if I believe that I had lost communications with ATC, but again, that's a completely different topic and outside the scope of this tutorial. Next is the altitude assignment.
Maintain 2000, expect 5000 5 minutes after departure.
ATC wants the pilot to climb to 2,000 feet and tells them to expect an instruction to climb up to 5,000 feet 5 minutes after takeoff. Like the heading instruction though, the pilot is cleared to 2,000 feet and no higher until they receive further explicit instructions. The expect 5,000 5 minutes after departure is only relevant in the case of lost communications. Again, it's almost impossible to emphasize this too strongly. When you hear ATC say to expect something, a heading, an intercept, an altitude change, an approach, a landing runway assignment, or anything else, you must treat it as purely advisory. It's a heads up about something that will probably happen in the near future. Don't actually do the thing ATC said to expect until you receive an explicit instruction to do so, except in the case of lost communications. Now for some of you watching, I'll bet it's a little frustrating to keep hearing references to lost communications and then be told it won't be covered. That's the problem with these point-specific tutorials and incremental learning. I can only cover so much in a single topic, and lost comm procedures all by themselves would probably take an hour or more just to cover the basics. You can certainly study that on your own. There's tons of topics on the web about it, and it will certainly be covered either in another tutorial that I do or that Pilot Edge covers in a workshop. Now let's hear the final two parts of the clearance, the departure frequency and the transponder setting.
Departure frequency 127.2, squawk 7221.
So there we have it, a complete clearance, sliced and diced into the elements that you will hear in exactly this sequence every time ATC reads one to you. After writing down the clearance, ATC will expect you to read it back. So let's listen to Caravan 6 Delta Echo give their read back for this clearance.
Okay, we're clear to Palomar via heading 175 vectors to join Victor 23. That's filed. We'll maintain 2,000. Expect 5,005. 27.2 for departure and 7221 for 6 Delta Echo.
Cameron 6 Delta Echo, read back correct.
Now let's listen to a couple more clearances. I won't go into the detailed analysis this time, but will parse the craft elements for you as they happen. The first of these is another Pilot Edge clearance for a flight from LAX to McCarran Airport in Las Vegas. The pace of this clearance is a lot slower, and it should be easy for you to follow along.
Los Angeles clearance. Learjet November 123 Mike Sierra Charlie Terminal with the numbers requesting IFR clearance to Las Vegas McCarran as filed.
Learjet 123 Mike Sierra Los Angeles clearance. Cleared to the Las Vegas Airport Loop 6 departure, DAG at transition, then as filed. Maintain 5,000. Departure frequency will be 125.2. Squawk 7261.
Roger, cleared to Las Vegas McCarran Loop 6 departure, DAG at transition, climb maintain 5,000. Departure frequency 125.2, squawk 7261, 123 Mike Sierra.
Learjet 3 Mike Sierra, read back correct. Contact ground when ready to taxi, expect runway 25 right.
The route for this clearance didn't have an initial heading because it's already specified in the Loop 6 departure that was assigned. Departure procedures and transitions are the subject of the I-5 rating, and you'll get to learn about those later. Notice also that after acknowledging that the readback was correct, the clearance delivery controller told the pilot to contact ground control when ready to taxi. This is a very common advisory, and to expect runway 25 right. There's another expect advisory again, and it was certainly not a clearance to taxi to runway 25 right, but by now you already know that. Finally, here's a real-world clearance from Reno Airport that's kind of neat because it appears to be for a Navy F-18 fighter on the way to the China Lake Naval Air Warfare Station. Let's listen.
Vampire 1-1, Reno clearance, clear to China Lake via Reno for departure. Fly heading 330, vector to Squaw Valley, then as filed. Climb and maintain 15,000, departure frequency 126.3, squawk 3616.
Whether you're flying a Cessna 172, a Navy fighter, a Boeing 747, or any other type of aircraft, you can count on receiving your departure clearance in the craft sequence every time. Knowing that should make it a lot easier to be ready to copy and read back your departure clearance. In fact, there's nothing wrong with writing down CRAFT in a vertical fashion on your scratch pad before you call for your clearance, and then write each part of it by the appropriate letter as you hear it. That ensures you didn't miss any part because, as we've said, every departure clearance you get will have every one of the 5 craft elements. Let's return now to the departure clearance we can anticipate receiving for the I-1 rating. The clearance is very likely to sound something like this. Cessna 757 Victor Bravo is cleared to the John Wayne Airport. After departure, fly heading 220, radar vectors Seal Beach, direct. Climb and maintain 2,000. Expect 3,000 5 minutes after departure. Departure frequency 127.2, squawk 6122. Now in real life, you certainly won't want to try to literally transcribe the clearance as I did here. So let's listen to this one more time. And I'll show you what I would actually write on my notepad as I was listening to the clearance. Cessna 757 Victor Bravo is cleared to the John Wayne Airport. After departure, fly heading 220, radar vectors Seal Beach, direct. Climb and maintain 2,000. Expect 3,000 5 minutes after departure. Departure frequency 127.2, squawk 6122. Everybody develops their own personal shorthand for writing down clearances, and you will too. As long as you can unambiguously understand what you wrote and be able to read it back, you're fine. If the word direct at the end of the route clearance seems a little mysterious, well, it did to me too when I did the rating, and for quite a long time afterwards, and I've only recently come to completely understand what it means. It's shorthand for direct to your clearance limit. In this clearance, it's only relevant in the case of lost communications. There's that phrase again. So you need to write it down and read it back as part of your clearance, but it's not going to come into play for the I-1 rating, and we won't elaborate on it right now. Okay, we've gotten our clearance and read it back, set up our communications and navigation radios, set our heading bug to 220 degrees to remind us what heading to fly after we take off, gotten the ATIS, called ground control to get our taxi clearance, taxi to the runway, and talk to the tower to get our takeoff clearance. Then we are now flown the runway heading to a safe altitude, maybe 400 or 500 feet AGL, then made a right turn to our assigned heading of 220 degrees. When do we make the turn to the Seal Beach VOR? I'll give you a moment to think about that. And it's basically a trick question. Because as we discussed before, unless we determine that we've lost communications with ATC, we will not ever make a turn on our own towards the Seal Beach VOR. Remember, we were told to fly a heading of 220 and advised that this was a radar vector to Seal Beach. We just keep on motoring along on the 220 heading until we hear otherwise from ATC. About the time we've gotten established onto the 220 heading, John Wayne Tower will hand us off to approach control with the phrase, Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, contact departure. We'll acknowledge that by saying, over to departure, Cessna 7 Victor Bravo. We switch over to the departure frequency and give SoCal a call. We only need to tell them 3 things: who we are, what our current altitude is, and what altitude we're climbing up to. Our initial call to departure then should sound something like this. SoCal departure, Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, 700, climbing 2000. Keep your ATC radio calls brief and try to avoid using long, folksy phrases like Cessna 757 Victor Bravo is with you at 700 for 2000. The phrase "is with you" may make you think you sound like a real pilot, but it's actually meaningless and wastes a few seconds of what could be precious time for a controller when they're busy handling lots of traffic. Using the word "for" instead of "climbing" isn't a grievous sin, but why make the controller have to mentally translate what you mean? When you're changing from one sector controller to another while making an altitude change, just report your current altitude, whether you're climbing or descending, and your assigned altitude. Giving them your current altitude allows them to check that the altimeter is encoding the altitude correctly. If we say we're at 700 feet and the data block on their radar screen says 700 feet, then all is good. SoCal will acknowledge our call with the response Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, SoCal departure, radar contact. This is a mandatory call for them and might be all we hear, but we're extremely likely to hear a clearance to the altitude they told us to expect, so the actual response from SoCal is more likely to be Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, SoCal departure, radar contact, climb and maintain 3000. We don't need to acknowledge the radar contact part of their call, but we do need to acknowledge the new altitude assignment. So the call up to 3000 Cessna 7 Victor Bravo will be sufficient. When the departure controller eventually turns us to the north, expect to hear something like Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, turn right heading 010 vectors to the final approach course. Now they might say something more explicit like vectors to the John Wayne ILS runway 19 right approach, or maybe something as sparse as vectors to final. But I promise you'll hear something like that phrase because ATC is required to tell you what their intentions are when they make you fly a heading that's not part of your cleared route. Sometimes it might be vectors for spacing or vectors for traffic, but they'll always tell you why you're being turned off your planned course. And yes, of course, the reason to do that is so that you'll know what to do in the case of lost communications. Once they start vectoring you for a particular reason, though, they won't repeat that reason on subsequent vectors. You'll just get the new heading assignment. If you're starting to get the idea that almost everything about ATC communications under instrument flight rules is based around the possibility that radio communications might be lost, that's right. If you're ever in this situation where you're flying in IMC, which is a shorthand for Instrument Meteorological Conditions, which is longhand for saying in the clouds, and your radios quit working, you'll be very glad to know exactly what to do next and to know that all the folks who will be keeping you safe by clearing other airplanes out of your way also know exactly what you're going to do. While we're making our way up north, this will be a good time to do the instrument approach briefing. We won't cover that right now, but you'll see it when we do the flight portion of the tutorial. We'll be flying north for a little while, and then we'll probably get a turn to a heading of 100 degrees, placing us on sort of a base leg at roughly 90 degrees to the localizer. And then when we're close enough, a final turn to a heading of 170 or perhaps 165. Either of those will give us roughly a 30-degree intercept for the runway 19 right localizer. By air traffic control rules, you're guaranteed to never have to intercept the approach course at more than 30 degrees. And that makes the last turn towards the final approach course very predictable. Once you're flying generally towards the localizer, or a VOR radial, or a GPS waypoint, or whatever, you can know for sure that your last vector will put you at about 30 degrees or less from the final approach course. And anything that you can mentally anticipate in instrument flying is a good thing. It helps you to stay ahead of the game. What it doesn't mean is that you can make the turn before ATC tells you to. But when they do call the turn, it won't even vaguely be a surprise. You should know the vector that they're going to give you. So if you've got a moving map display in your airplane on your GPS and you watch your position relative to your final approach course, when you see yourself at a place where a right or maybe a left turn will place you at a 30-degree intercept, you can even anticipate when the controller is going to tell you to turn. And indeed, if for some reason they don't give you an intercept heading at about where you expect, there is nothing wrong with giving the controller a quick call on the radio. SoCal approach, Cessna 757 Victor Bravo coming up on the localizer. That's sort of a polite way of saying, hey, did you fall asleep down there? When that final vector towards the localizer happens is also where you're going to get your approach clearance. and this is the second place where new instrument pilots have a little bit of a panic. And this will be worse than the panic you experienced when you heard your first departure clearance, because you're not sitting safely on the ground in a stationary airplane. This time you're flying the airplane, maybe in solid IMC. You can't see anything out the window, you're probably getting bounced around by turbulence, and the last thing you're probably ready to hear is something like this.
Number 132 Kilo Tango, 3 miles from Snake, turn right heading 170, maintain 3000 until established, clear ILS runway 19 right approach.
Again, if you got all of that on the first try, you're probably watching this tutorial for its questionable entertainment value rather than to learn how to fly the various pilot edge ratings. For the rest of you, you'll be glad to know that once again, an approach clearance has a specific structure. You'll be sad to hear that it's not the same structure as for a departure clearance, but you'll be happy again when you learn that I have a new mnemonic for you to learn. Well, maybe not exactly happy, but this will help you to decipher an approach clearance. The mnemonic this time is PTAC, P-T-A-C. That helps us remember the 4 elements of an approach clearance: position, turn, altitude, and clearance. An approach clearance will generally contain all 4 of these elements. There's a small exception that I'll mention later. Let's go through the same exercise we did before and dissect this approach clearance piece by piece.
Number 132 Kilo Tango, 3 miles from Snake.
As it turns out, the position element of the clearance is not extraordinarily useful, and it's not technically required if you're being vectored to an initial approach fix. As I understand it, it's part of the approach clearance for historical reasons, not because it's of great practical use anymore. Part of the reason it's not practically that useful is because there's no particular navigational fix that the controller has to reference. In the case we just heard, Snake is an intersection that will be behind the airplane once it intercepts the localizer. But the only way for the pilot to know that is to be watching their position on a GPS display or keeping careful track of VOR radials to know if they're inside or outside of Snake when the position report is given. Now, I'm not suggesting that you don't need to know the position of your aircraft. You definitely do. Indeed, you should know that at all times. Once you've intercepted the localizer, for example, you need to know what the next fix ahead of you is so you can plan your descent. Here's the turn portion of the clearance now.
Turn right heading 170.
No surprises there. That's one of the exact vectors that we were expecting. Now let's listen for the altitude restriction.
Maintain 3000 until established.
Until established is just shorthand for until established on your final approach course. In this case, it means until you have intercepted the localizer. And finally now, let's listen to the actual approach that they're being cleared to fly.
Clear ILS runway 19 right approach.
The clearance element is surprisingly flexible for the controller. The minimally valid clearance would be simply cleared approach. And as wacky as that sounds, that means we're allowed to fly any published approach we want into the airport. You won't receive a wide open clearance like that very often, but even here we actually have a choice of 2 different approaches if we actually did get that clearance, because we're in position to fly either the ILS runway 19 right approach or the localizer runway 19 right approach. In this case, though, the approach clearance is very specific. We're cleared to fly the ILS runway 19 right approach. When we read back an approach clearance, we only repeat the turn, altitude, and clearance elements, but not the position. So I'll say that again. We listen for the 4 PTAC elements, but we read back only the 3 TAC elements. Here's the pilot readback of the John Wayne ILS clearance.
Heading 173 till established, cleared ILS 19 right, parent 2 Kilo Tango.
For a little more practice, let's listen to another approach clearance with its associated readback. I'll transcribe the clearance into the PTAC elements as it's read, and I want you to note that the readback, as is proper, doesn't include the position element of the clearance.
Number 132 Kilo Tango, 5 miles from Escon, turn right heading 210, maintain 3500 till established, cleared ILS runway 24 approach.
Heading 210, 3.5 till established, cleared the ILS 24, bearing 2 Kilo Tango.
Our approach clearance for the I-1 rating is going to be almost exactly like the first clearance we heard. As well it should, since that was the clearance that Keith received during his I-1 tutorial video that's on the Training Center site. Our clearance will sound about like this. Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, 3 miles from Snake, turn right heading 170, maintain 3000 until established, cleared ILS runway 19 right approach. While we're on our intercept heading and waiting for the localizer needle to start to move, we've got one more task in front of us. Once we've intercepted and started to track the localizer inbound, what should we do about our altitude? Well, there are 3 things we know for sure that will help us determine that. First, we're guaranteed that our vector will allow us to intercept the localizer at least 2 miles outside the final approach fix. That's an ATC rule. For this approach, Lemon is our final approach fix. We could be further out than 2 miles from Lemon, but we won't be any closer than that. Second, we're guaranteed our altitude will be above the minimum intercept altitude for the glide slope, and that our current altitude will be below the glide slope itself, because this is also an ATC rule. And this is a lot easier to visualize by looking at the vertical profile section of the approach plate. ATC turns us towards the localizer with about a 20 to 25 degree, maybe a 30 degree intercept. This will result in our intercept of the localizer occurring at 3,000 feet, because that's the altitude that they have assigned us to, and at about where the red diamonds are on the vertical profile section of the approach plate. We're guaranteed that we will be below the dark blue line, which represents the glide slope, and above the light blue line, which represents the minimum glide slope intercept altitude. We know that the actual intercept will not be outside of Snake, because the minimum en route altitude outside of Snake is 3,400 feet, and we're lower than that. And we also know that the actual intercept will be no closer than 2 miles from Lemon. So it pretty much has to be somewhere in the region where the red diamonds are. Since we're inside Snake, as soon as we've established on the localizer, we can descend to 2,300 feet and prepare to intercept the glide slope at Lemon intersection. The odds are good that you'll already be receiving the glide slope while you're flying the localizer intercept heading well outside of Lemon. But technically, you must not use that information for vertical guidance yet. The glide slope is not guaranteed to be valid until you reach Lemon. And how do I know that? That's a good question. I know it because the little lightning bolt symbol that reaches from the 2,300 altitude marking to point at the Lemon intersection. That symbol is used on every ILS approach plate to indicate the glide slope intercept altitude. The correct way for us to fly this ILS approach is to, after we've intercepted the localizer, is to descend smartly to 2,300 feet, level out, and then intercept the glide slope at Lemon and begin descending again, tracking down the glide slope for our vertical guidance and the localizer for our lateral guidance. In practical terms in the cockpit, that just means keeping the needles centered. Finally, the last thing we need to know is the lowest altitude we can safely descend to while flying down the glide slope. That's answered by this line on the approach plate, which tells us the minimum altitudes for all of the various types of approaches available on this plate. We're flying a straight-in ILS approach, which is what the nomenclature S-ILS means, so we cannot descend any lower than 255 feet MSL. This is only 200 feet above the ground, unless we can see the runway environment. For ILS approaches, this altitude is often called the decision height or sometimes the decision altitude. And if you can't see the runway environment when you reach this altitude, you must immediately execute the missed approach procedure. Missed approaches are covered in a later rating, and we won't discuss them here. Assuming you can't see the runway at or before you reach the decision height, though, you simply execute a normal landing, exit from the runway, and then wait for the tower or ground controller to tell you that you finished your I-1 rating with a pass. Okay, so that's plenty of talking now. Let's go fly the I-1 rating. Okay, we're sitting on the ramp at John Wayne, and we are sitting in our trusty Cessna 172 757 Victor Bravo. You can completely ignore what the plate on this
Skyline 735
stock
verify
airplane
squawking
says.
normal contact SoCal departure. We'll see ya.
And we have just checked the weather. We are a marginal VFR right now at John Wayne. The weather is showing, let's see, latest weather is showing visibility of 7 miles, a few clouds at 700 feet, and overcast at 1,000 feet. That's perfect for a practice ILS approach.
Skyline 735 uniform SoCal departure, radar contact, climb maintain 6,000.
We are well above minimums. And we have already filed our flight plan. We're going to, as discussed in the lecture part of the tutorial. We filed John Wayne to John Wayne via Seal Beach VOR. Have not called for our clearance yet. We'll do that in just a couple of minutes. And weather just updated, and it has not changed significantly. Go ahead and pull up the airport diagram. And you can see we are sitting on the west ramp here at John Wayne Airport, which means that our ground control frequency will be 132.25. We've got that set up in our standby frequency right now. And clearance delivery is set in our primary frequency.
Seneca
We'll be talking to
59310, 11 miles from Hildy, turn left heading 150, maintain 3000 until established on the localizer, cleared ILS runway 212 approach.
We will be talking to clearance delivery in just a minute. In the meantime now let's make sure our radios are set up correctly. There are really two navigational aids we're going to need for this. One of them is the Seal Beach VOR,
Centurion 5,
which
8,
is
correction, Centurion 9 Zulu, the Burbank Airport is at your 11 o'clock, 10 miles, report the field and site.
the Seal Beach VOR is actually set up on my secondary receiver. Even though it's in principle the first navigational aid we're going to use, in practice we're never going to actually get there. And so I've got it set up to show me, it's set for radial 075, which as a reminder...
And Skyline 735 uniform, turn right direct Oceanside, resume on navigation.
Which as a reminder is our radial for the Lemon intersection, the 075, and this having it set up now will show us when we cross Lemon outbound, and then also when we cross Lemon back inbound once we're on the localizer. I could also dial in the Snake intersection on the 063 radial, but we actually will probably never reach that. Although we may reach the radial on our way out, we won't actually reach the intersection, and so Lemon is really all we need on the for the secondary VOR. And the reason I've got it set up on the secondary is I'm going to set up my my primary nav aid, which will be the localizer for John Wayne on 111.75 up on our primary. Our secondary VOR, as you can see, does not have a glide slope receiver, so that's not useful for our approach, but the primary one is. So we've got that set up now. We've got a heading of 194 dialed in. That's not strictly necessary because the
89 Zulu on our left base runway 8.
Because the localizer will show us the course deviation from the localizer irrespective of how the OBS is set. That's not true of a VOR receiver, where it does matter how your OBS is set, and so that's why we've got number 2 set for 075 degrees. So our navigation radios are all set. We will be getting our squawk when we get our clearance for the transponder, and we are after we talk to clearance, the next thing we'll be talking to is ground, in which case after which we will set the radios for ground control, for the tower as our secondary frequency, and then
Centurion 989 Zulu, contact Burbank Tower 118.7.
Once we're in position at the runway, we will switch the tower over to primary and put departure control frequency in as our backup, so that we are always ready with one step ahead with our radios. Okay, so our radios are at this point set, and we will go ahead and
Centurion 989 Zulu, Burbank Tower. Roger, wind 110 at 9er, visibility 10, skies clear, temperature 20, dew point 12, altimeter 2986, runway 8, cleared for the option. Are you going to be, can I expect this to be a touch and go, or are you going to be full stop, sir?
We'll go ahead and give clearance delivery a call as soon as the radio...
Centurion 89 Zulu, thank you, runway 8, clear to land.
John Wayne departure clearance, Cessna 757 Victor Bravo.
And number 757 Victor Bravo, John Wayne clearance.
Clearance 7 Victor Bravo, IFR to John Wayne, request is on file.
Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, clearance on request, standby. Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, I have your clearance badge ready to copy, and if you don't mind, what approach can I expect you to do first?
7 Victor Bravo, we're going to do the ILS.
Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, roger, thank you. Cessna 757 Victor Bravo is cleared to the John Wayne Airport after departure, flight heading 220. Radar vectors Seal Beach, direct, maintain 2000. Expect 3000 5 minutes after departure. Departure frequency 127.2, squawk 7374.
Cessna 7 Victor Bravo is cleared to the John Wayne Airport, heading 220, radar vectors Seal Beach direct, 2000, expect 3000 after 5, 127.2 for the frequency, and squawk 7374.
Cessna 7 Victor Bravo, read back correct. Seneca 59310, contact Santa Maria Tower 118.3, we'll see you.
Okay, our next step now is to call ground control and let them know we are ready to taxi. So before we do that, we actually have to get the ATIS. That's 126.0 here at this airport.
John Wayne Airport information, Echo 1937 Zulu, wind 210 at 7, visibility greater than 20 miles, sky condition, few clouds at 700, ceiling 1000.
Seneca 59310, Santa Maria Tower, roger. Advise me going west.
ILF, runway 19, right in use. Land.
And we can go ahead and dial in the tower frequency, which will be 126.8. That will be what we'll swap over to after we
Skyline
get to the
735
runway.
uniform, contact SoCal approach 127.2.
And let's go ahead and give ground control a call. John Wayne Ground, Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, west ramp, taxi IFR.
Number 757 Victor Bravo, John Wayne Ground, runway 19 right, taxi via Bravo Lima.
Via Bravo Lima to 19 right, and we do have information echo.
Skyline 735 uniform, SoCal approach, roger. Seneca 59310, Santa Barbara departure, roger. Execute published Mr. Perk procedure. Advise me when ready to continue. Expect further clearance at 034, it makes it 0350 Zulu. 0350 Zulu for your further clearance time.
Okay, we've switched over to tower frequency and are
And Seneca 310, advise me when you're ready to continue with your approaches.
have the departure control ready for switching over once we are airborne. And we'll go ahead and give tower a call and let them know that we're ready to go. John Wayne Tower, Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, 19 right, ready to go IFR.
So 757 Victor Bravo, John Wayne Tower, wind 210 at 7, runway 19 right, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, 19 right, 7 Victor Bravo.
Skyline 735 uniform, say approach request. Okay, 735 uniform, you need to request permission just to step off frequency, sir. Oh, 735 uniform, roger, sorry about that.
Heading 220.
Skyline 735 uniform, roger. So 757 Victor Bravo, contact SoCal departure.
Over to departure, 7 Victor Bravo. Listen for just a second, make sure the frequency is clear. SoCal departure, Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, 1,500, climbing 2,000.
So 757 Victor Bravo, SoCal departure, radar contact, climb maintain 3000, turn right heading 330, vectors ILS, runway 19 approach.
Up to 3,000, turn right heading 330, vectors for the ILS, 7 Victor Bravo, thanks. We are in solid IMC right now in the clouds. And 500 feet to go to our assigned altitude of 3,000. Let's go ahead and identify our navigation aids. First, let's identify Seal Beach. And that's identified. 100 feet to go. Let's identify the ILS for John Wayne if we can. And that's identified. Okay, we've got good identification on both of our navigation aids. As you can see from the ForeFlight moving map display, we're kind of heading halfway between the Seal Beach and the ILS. You'll probably get a turn more to the north and very shortly. Reduce our throttle just a little bit to our cruise speed, about 2,400 RPM should be good. And we'll go ahead and lean out the mixture just a little bit. Now notice this is not going exactly as the same as we had briefed in the tutorial, the lecture part of the tutorial. We've got a slightly different heading than we had expected, but that's fine.
So 757 Victor Bravo, turn right heading 010.
Right to 010, 7 Victor Bravo. As expected, there's a right turn. And now this heading is what we expected. They've just got us flying a little bit wider than the example that we used in the tutorial at the beginning. We're northbound now. And while we've got time here, now is a good time to brief the ILS. We expect to, we are on vectors to the final approach course, which means we expect to be turned right somewhere up, perhaps just shy or around the Snake intersection. So that'll be perhaps, let's see, 3.5 and, say 7 or 8 miles from now, we'll be getting a right turn. Then we'll fly roughly on a sort of a base leg, a 90-degree intercept initially for the localizer. then we'll expect to get turned to a heading of 165 or 170 to intercept the localizer. We'll be intercepting inside the snake interception at 3,000 feet. Once we've intercepted, we'll descend to 2,300 feet and expect a glide slope to come alive somewhere in that time, but we won't actually intercept it until we reach Lemon, at which point we will proceed down the localizer and down the glide slope to a decision height of 255 feet. If we do not have the runway in sight at 255 feet, then we will execute a missed approach procedure, which calls for a climb straight ahead on
Skyline
the
735 uniform,
localizer.
descend and maintain 3,000, reduce speed 9 knots or less.
Descend maintain 3,000 and reduce speed to 90 knots or less, Skyline 73 uniform.
We have crossed Lemon now. To continue the briefing, if we have to execute the missed approach, that'll be a climb straight ahead to 3,000 feet on the John Wayne localizer south course out to Minnow intersection, where we will hold if necessary.
And Skyline 75 uniform, fly present heading, vectors, ILS runway 19 right approach.
Fly present heading and vectors for the approach, Skyline 72 uniform.
That completes our approach briefing. A couple more miles, we should be expecting our right turn. John Wayne Tower is the next entity we'll be talking to after we're done with departure control, and that's already on our standby, so we don't have to fiddle with the radios anymore.
Skyline 735 uniform, turn right heading 010.
Right heading is 010, Skyline 73 uniform.
So 757 Victor Bravo, turn right heading 100.
Right to 100, 7 Victor Bravo.
Skyline 735 uniform, set current flight conditions.
We got some clouds below us, but for the most part it's pretty clear at Skyline 72 uniform.
And Skyline 75 uniform, Roger, is what kind of, are you using real weather or are you using flight sim weather? I'd just like to know what kind of cloud deck will display you.
We're supposedly using real weather, Skyline 72 uniform.
Skyline 75 uniform, Roger, resume normal speed.
Okay, resuming normal speed, Skyline 72 uniform.
Our next turn, as we briefed during the first part of the tutorial, will be a intercept vector of 30 degrees or less, so it should be a heading of somewhere between 170 and 160. I suspect it's, well, we'll see. We're actually outside Snake right now, and they need to get us turned back inside Snake for this altitude. It's actually, we're at or above the minimum vectoring altitude, which is slightly different from the minimum en route altitude
So
that we would be able to fly
Victor
from.
Bravo, 5 miles from Lemon, turn right heading 160, maintain 3,000 until established in the localizer, cleared ILS runway 19 right approach.
Right to 160, maintain 3,000 until established, cleared ILS runway 19 right approach, 7 Victor Bravo, thank you. So this vector will definitely have us intercept inside of the Snake intersection. And we're watching now for the needle movement on the localizer. We are getting glide slope indication, but as we talked about in the tutorial, we completely ignore it for now. It is not valid. Once the needle starts to move, I'll go ahead and switch to nav mode on the autopilot, which will give us a nice clean intercept, or should. We'll watch it very carefully though, just in case. And there comes the localizer. Okay, we're established. Now down to 2,300 feet.
Skyline 735 uniform, turn 10 degrees right.
10 degrees to the right, Skyline 735 uniform.
Cess 757 Victor Bravo, contact John Wayne Tower, 126.8.
Tower on 126.8, 7 Victor Bravo, thanks. John Wayne Tower, Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, Lemon.
Cess 757 Victor Bravo, John Wayne Tower, wind 2107, runway 19 right, clear to land.
Clear land, 19 right, 7 Victor Bravo. That is the outer marker, so that verifies we are at Lemon. Pre-landing checklist, our mixture is rich. We have flaps 10 degrees.
Seneca 5931 Sierra, the San Luis altimeter 2990.
Looking for about 75 knots on our approach speed. Localizer is good, glide slope is good, airspeed is good. We're looking now for our decision height, which is 255 feet. Just a little less than 1,000 feet to go now, down to our decision
Skyline 735 uniform,
altitude.
turn right, heading 100.
Localizer track is good, glide slope is good, airspeed is on target.
Seneca 5931 Sierra, I'm going to give you a new EFC time. Expect further clearance at 0400 Zulu, time now 0343.5. Seneca 5931 Sierra, roger, on your next pass, depart Morro Bay, heading 180.
Good rate of descent, 500 feet per minute on the localizer, on the glide slope. Airspeed is close to our target. We can pull just a little power, let it slow slightly.
Seneca 5931 Sierra, disregard my last clearance. Cross Morro Bay at or above 4,000, cleared VOR runway 12 approach. Report passing Guadalupe. And Seneca 5931 Sierra, you are cleared for the approach, sir.
We're starting to see a little bit of the ground now.
Skyline 735 uniform. 7 miles from Lemon, turn right, heading 160, maintain 3,000 until established on the localizer, cleared ILS, runway 19 right approach.
There's our decision height. Runway is in sight. Continue. I was right down to minimums.
Cessna 9362 Mike, just got you in sight. Now wind 200 at 3 runway 16, clear to land. Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, you going straight ahead to parking?
That's affirmative. Straight ahead.
Cessna 757 Victor Bravo, taxi straight ahead to parking. Remain this frequency. Have a good night.
Straight ahead to parking. Stay on this frequency. 7 Victor Bravo. Thanks for your help tonight. And that is basically the I-1 rating. It doesn't necessarily have to be that exciting. And I would definitely suggest that if you, when you decide to fly it your first time, that you do it in VFR weather, just so that the anxiety of the weather doesn't have to be a part of the process. Even though this did not go exactly the way that we discussed it in the lecture portion of the tutorial earlier, the basic actions and circumstances were exactly the same. We flew a radar vector out of the airport. We got turned to the right, just a slightly different heading than we had talked about. Then we got turned to the north on exactly the heading that we expected. Flew a little further north than we did on the earlier tutorial version of the plan. But we got exactly the vector we expected, about a 160, intercepted the localizer and flew down. Just as it happened, the airport was, or the weather was right at minimum, so we were maybe only 50 feet from having to call that a missed approach and go around. So, but we did clear, as you saw, just before we got to our decision height, and were able to make a good landing. So that is the I-1 rating. You should give it a try yourself. You can practice it offline if you like a couple times, and then give it a try. And I think that you'll find the material we covered in the earlier part of the tutorial about copying clearances and reading them back should be pretty helpful to you. As you heard, those clearances came pretty rapidly, but since we knew what to expect, it really was pretty easy to read back both the departure clearance and then later the approach clearance, because we used our craft elements for the departure, and then we used our PTAC listening skills and then TAC readback for the approach clearance. So as always, have fun on Pilot Edge, and we'll probably see you in a future tutorial.